Producer dude, here we are again. I know you don't like your time with me, and when we're not on the water, I think we have what
Wait,
is it like?
I don't love my time with you doing podcasts or when we're on the water or both, because I would say it's the latter.
Yes, it's all the above.
Yeah,
feeling is partially mutual, but here's the deal: we've been doing this a long time together, and we work our way into some interesting things. We've had Al Linder on, obviously the king of fish, and we've got a guy that I'm going to guess most of these people probably don't know. I did not know him. We some mutual friends and stuff, but John Durtka, and I say that probably wrong here, but he's doing some spearfishing. I don't even know how I stand or where I stand on this. I mean, you're a very conservation oriented individual. Like, where do you even think you might stand on this?
I mean, I would think it's harder than just more involved than I mean, just looking at his videos, just, go down there and, you're shooting at one fish, and probably when you shoot one, the rest of them's probably scatter, I would imagine. Right.
Yeah. So. I don't even from an ethical standpoint, also, like, these are the questions I'm sure people are going to bring up, but truthfully, we're not here to, we're going to learn about this, I would imagine, because I'm going to, pull no punches and figure some of the stuff out. But I think the biggest thing, I want to learn about this habitat. Like, he's got some videos he sent us, and what you can learn from that. So our guys that follow us and say, hey, I'm not into spearfishing, like, yeah, I get it. Neither am I. I'm not going to be doing this. But I think they need to stay tuned, because these videos that we've already watched here, that you're probably going to put some in the podcast, aren't you, ultimately?
Yes.
So the fish, like, learning this is like a giant Aquaview camera, right? And some of the stuff that we kind of talked with him about is crazy. So I think that's going to be enough to keep a lot of these guys engaged in this, because I know I'm definitely wanting to know more and more about this. So
yeah, he just can sit on the bottom and observe what happens to these fish and what they do. I mean, he just sits down there and watches, and it's pretty cool.
Crazy stuff. So let's get him on here, because I don't even know where to go with this, but I imagine we're going to go down Pandora's box here. We have John Durtka. Did I even say that properly?
Close enough. I won't give you any crap about it.
We're just going to call you John moving forward.
I love it.
So I don't even know how we really got here. It's funny how the fishing world works, but I had seen a few things on Instagram. People send stuff around, and I see this guy spearfishing, right? Some people, when you hear that and you don't have anything else, and you just think in your mind, like, what's that mean? You're kind of like, I'm thinking Hawaii. I might be thinking Native American. I might be thinking, like, I don't know, like, what's going on. But yet we know some mutual people, right? And you start looking into this, and I thought, like, okay, I'm seeing some hate there. I'm seeing you getting blown up by people's comments, which we're no stranger to that, because people on the internet are dipshits. But on the second half of that, I start seeing some of these videos, and we're hoping to sneak a few in on the podcast for the people that are watching the video portion of this when it runs. And, you can learn an awful lot. Like, that's really what I kind of want to pick your brain on a little bit, because, like, we think we know what's going on. People talk about mega live imaging and side imaging, that stuff, but there is no substitute for seeing it with your own two eyes, man.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I've only been doing it a couple of years, but I definitely learned a lot from being in the water and getting to see them in their natural habitat, how, curious they are, and different patterns throughout the day that I wouldn't have ever known.
So let's start from day one here, because I truthfully don't know shit about this. So how the heck do you get into spearfishing or whatever these proper terms are? I don't even know. So talk to us like we're ding dongs here, because me and producer dude, we don't know.
Ding dongs. We're ding dongs.
Ding dongs.
How do you get into it? Like, what kind of gear you need, or just?
Well, I mean, just even maybe a little more than that. Like, I mean, again, like, there's people
jump in the water and swim with fish.
Well, if you want to be a professional basketball player, you get a basketball for $20, in the dollar store, and then you go shoot, at a park, right? Like, I mean, not that it's not accessible, but it's not as much, I wouldn't think. Like, I mean, like, producer dude, I mean, do you know, hey, if I give you $500 in 10 hours, where are you going to go buy a spear gun for walleyes? Like,
yeah.
So kind of just how'd you get started? How did this start?
Yeah, I mean, my brother just posted some pictures on Facebook of a tournament he did with the Michigan Spearfishing Association. And me being the underwater adventurer that I was, being a lifeguard, I just was like, hey, I just moved back from California actually, and I'd been out there diving for lobsters and grabbing them by hand, and I was like, hey, I want to check this out and try it. It was exactly like bow fishing, just you got to go underneath the water. And so I tried it. They had all the gear for me. I had a wetsuit, like a surfing wetsuit, because that water, it gets cold. Fins, a mask, snorkel, and that's pretty much all you really need to get into the water. The gun, was a little bit extra, but you get in and you start, you learn real quick, like, okay, how to hold your breath and how to equalize your ears because of the pressure from that. And then what we were doing is finding structure, finding any kind of break walls or anything that we could find that you could swim along the side of and just try and find fish.
So there is a producer, dude. We've learned already very quickly because we are ding dongs here, but there is an association in Michigan for this. Is this held in a church basement or like what's going on here?
It's, it's just a little website and a little club that we put on a little tournament every year. Cause there's only, maybe 50 or 60 of us that really do this,
that's 40 more than I thought, but okay.
Any kind of consistency. And, you got a little bit of new people coming in here and there, but, we just kind of have a little association just for our crew, just for, just for the club charter or whatever. And then, that's just kind of how you get your name in for, just like walleye association, walleye fishing association, the salmon, charter associations and things of that nature. They all have associations. Associations can give feedback to the DNR and the Natural Resource Commission, and that kind of is how you become part of the fishing community. So that's why they started it, to get involved in the community and ultimately have what we had happen here was get more opportunities. So
do you know off the top of your head, ballpark, like how many states even have laws that allow this?
9 non-coastal inland states, like Montana, Utah, Arizona, Arkansas, Wisconsin, North and South Dakota, Michigan. I think there's a couple more in there now, but when I say that, I mean game fish. Most all states except I think maybe Florida doesn't have rules regarding freshwater rough fish spearfishing.
So we can go shoot carp no matter where we're at pretty much. Exactly. But if you want to take a game fish, for people that don't know, that would be like a largemouth bass. That would be a walleye, stuff like that.
Yes. Yep. There's about 9 non-coastal states that allow freshwater spearfishing of game fish.
So I have so many questions.
So you went through a whole process to get this legalized here in Michigan, right? Talk about that process and what you had to do to get this on the map here in Michigan.
It's a whole rigmarole, man. I'll tell you what, I went in front of the Natural Resource Commission and just told them about what spearfishing was and the physical challenges and the opportunities as far as seasonality goes, because of the water temperatures kind of restrict you, water clarity restricts you, and things of that nature. And I just kind of gave them the whole, hey, what do we got to do to get this opportunity to expand? Because right now all we're shooting is rough fish, your bowfin, your carp, your suckers. We were like, hey, we want to shoot fish that we can actually eat. We don't want to just shoot fish and throw them away. And that's, a big kind of barrier for a lot of people. They don't want to, involve themselves in a sport where you just shoot fish and throw them away, which a lot of people were doing. So I just kind of told them about that. And they were like, well, go talk to the fisheries division of the DNR. And I talked to them, showed them videos. They talked with those other states that have freshwater spearfishing opportunities for game fish. They told them why they do it and the effects of it. They came back to me and said, hey, let's make up an order. We'll put it in front of all of our warm and cold water resource steering committee meetings. Like those are the groups of anglers that have those associations. And we're going to get their feedback on it. And I was there for those, and I kind of talked everybody through it, showed them what it was. Jordan with Michigan Out of Doors helped me do an episode to explain what it was. And just over those, 3 years and moving through COVID, kind of slowed it down a little bit. But just talking with people, explaining what it was, just opening up on minimal waters. And then we have to report everything we do. And that, over 3 years, we just got it passed to allow for the northern pike, the lake trout, and the walleye on certain portions of Lake Michigan and Lake Huron.
Producer dude, are you shocked that this could be done in 3 years with the government?
And during COVID.
That's
Like, and it's Michigan. No offense, guys.
And they were receptive, and I mean, no one, put roadblocks in front of you or anything. I mean, what were some of the challenges?
Explaining to people, how you're going to tell the size of fish underwater when you're swimming down there with it. A lot of people worried about that. A lot of people worried about, over harvest of like trophy fish was a big worry, or pike was another weird one. Nobody really thought about pike was going to be an issue, but then everybody was like, oh, you're going to shoot all the pike. And then everybody in Lake Superior, actually, that was the reason Lake Superior got removed from the orders, because everybody thought we were going to shoot all these giant lake trout or something. So they got rid of that part, but it's just a 3-year trial. They want everybody to report and just kind of see who's doing it, when they're doing it, and how many fish are really, ultimately harvesting, what kind of impact we're having, because this isn't catch and release. This is, purely to harvest fish for eating. So that's a factor for them. They're like, hey, a lot of people catch and release or whatever. What about, those people and their say in the matter? And so those are all kind of things you got to work through.
And that's, I started looking through some of the comments on your stuff, and I'm like, dude, you could be a professional fisherman with the haters that you're getting coming at you with some of that stuff, right? But the funny thing is I don't even know where I stand on this, to be perfectly honest, because I'm so naive and coming in but open-minded. But I would tell people that are like not even open-minded at all, or maybe they're coming at where I'm at with this, and be like, listen, I know an awful lot of fishermen that are shitbags. And these guys take fish and they roll them around on the carpet. They hang them out for pictures for 20 minutes. You know what I mean? They lay them around on the floor of their boat. They got slime coat off. And then they're like, oh, look at me release this fish. I'm such a good human being. And you're like, no, you're a shitbag. And so that guy, like, again, there's so many places where you see guys rip hooks out and they throw fish back that are bloody. And it's like, you may be releasing that fish, but that fish is not going to live. Like mortality rates on this, or if you catch a fish in the summertime that's 75 feet down, which we do, right? Like, that fish is dead as a doornail, bro. It just is. And that's like with my guide service. So that's like a catch and go home trips. We don't do catch and release at that time of year, because it's catch and kill. So again, like where I'm going with that is if somebody goes out on one of those trips, like let's say with me in a boat, and they're like, yeah, we keep our however many fish limit, 15, 18, whatever, depending where you're at. And then they're like, oh, but we released 40 fish. And you're like, you probably killed 50 fish, 60 fish today, versus you going out and you taking 5 and you're like, I'm out. And you could be more specific. I almost think that this is actually, again, I haven't thought this through, but it almost seems like it's even more conservation oriented, because you're literally choosing, you're hunting.
Selective harvest. I see a school of 10 fish. I'm not shooting at 10 fish. I'm shooting at a fish, and I harvest that fish, and I don't touch, handle, or harm any other fish in that process.
But you know what? I think maybe some of the stuff came from, because again, back in the day, right? Like everything was like a different world as far as, like guys who were fishing in the Dakotas. Now you got Facebook, and I know what happens in the Dakotas fast as I know what happens out my back door.
Right.
And there are guys that I have been doing this out there for a long time.
Yeah.
Legal or not legal or whatever. I know
legal in the Dakotas. Yes.
Yeah. This has been going on a long time. And part of the heat that those guys were taking is when you go fish a tournament out in some of those bodies of water, let's say 20 pounds wins it. So that's like a 4-pound average. Like, you're the man. And these dudes were slapping some freaking 8s, 9s, 10s, and aboves on rocks. And all of a sudden people are having a big problem with that. So I guess where do you stand with that too? I mean, are you trying to shoot a 10-pound walleye because you're like, that's the trophy, like if you were deer hunting? Or is this more of like, where are you at with that?
That's a great question, actually. So I'm most of the fish I'm harvesting are between like 3 and like 5 and 6 pounds. Those are like the majority of the fish you're going to get. Those are the majority of the fish you're going to see. The bigger fish, they're kind of weird. They kind of hang out by themselves sometimes. Earlier in the spring, you'll see them a little bit more schooled up, but they're pretty skittish. They don't like hanging around you. I've only shot one fish that was 10 pounds, and it was.
We're going to get into specifics of that a little later, so don't get too deep on that one yet. Okay. That's on my hit list.
Okay, but I would say that absolutely, at some point in time, if you see a big fish in your spearfishing ventures, you're gonna want to harvest it. I think everybody wants to do that at some point or another. They want to get that big fish. You want to put it on the wall or something. But at a certain point, I think with a certain skill level comes a certain amount of responsibility. Sure, I can get a 10-pounder and I have access to them, but just because I do, I don't want to do that all the time, because at a certain point you're going to overrun your own resource. Just like if you shoot too many bucks or smaller bucks, or too many bucks in one area, you're going to eventually run all your bucks out of there, or whatever the case is. So I definitely think that it's going to be an individual choice, but I myself have already felt as soon as I got my trophy fish, I was like, okay, I'm good on a bigger fish. I'm going to take my normal fish or my 1 or 2 or whatever, and I'm going to keep on the size of the fish that I like. Because especially with the bigger fish, and you start getting to those upper 10s, you're going to start getting the fish that aren't as quality eating like your 3, 4, 5 pounders are.
Yeah, I mean, I just had this maybe about 4 or 5 days ago with a group of guys from not anywhere near here, and they've caught big fish. They've done this a long time. Their guys have been fishing walleyes longer than I've been alive, and we caught like a fish that was like 10 and a half or something. I mean, it was a giant, still had eggs in it, and we took a bunch of pictures, put it back in the lava. It was in great shape, and the guy was like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Well," I said, "I can't mandate this, but I said, if you're telling me," because I knew they weren't going to mount it. I'm like, if you are going to take this to the gut pile and just eat this thing, like, I'm just going to tell you, I'm going to throw it over the side.
Yeah.
and there was, you could definitely see there was a division. Like, one guy was like, "What the f-?" And the other guy was like, "Well," I'm like, seriously, is your ego that big that you need to go to a fish cleaning station to whack this thing? And then you're going to look at the meat and you're going to be like, what the heck? Right? Like, it just, and again, I think it's no different than with your deal, right? Like, once you kind of done it, like, do I need to do this again?
Right. Yeah. 100%. Yep. I shot a big pike last year. I'm sorry. And, it kind of came right into me. It was like the second pike I ever seen this summer, and I harvested it and I pulled it up and I was like, okay, I've done it. I'm going to keep my pike, I'm going to make sure I stay away from the big ones in that regard too. So I guess let's back up a little bit. Gun are gonna. And that's another thing I think too. Is like, I don't think just because you go spearfishing means you have access to a larger amount or more big fish just because you're spearfishing. You still have to be in the areas that these fish inhabit and know where, just like seasonal things where they spawn and where they feed and those kind of things. You have to know all those things in order to be on those fish. Just because you're in the water don't mean the fish are going to be there.
So, I mean, and again, it's like if we're trolling my boat, like me and producer dude have done for almost 14 years, I think now, like there's miles where you just don't have jack, or a little bit. I mean, when you're limited to basically you quite literally swimming, like, yeah. I mean, how often do you just go out there and you don't see shit?
Well, more often than not. I had a couple of years where I wasn't allowed to shoot walleye, where I was finding spots that walleye were inhabiting. But I mean, the first 4 trips I went on in May of last year, because we were all excited, went out to Augrey and Linwood, and we tried to get on them. First 4 trips, we didn't see a single fish. We trolled in, caught one, but first 4 trips of the year, we didn't have anything. After that, we went to, back into early June, the water started to clear up, water temperature started to come up in those mid 50s, and those fish started to come in closer to shore, and that gave us a lot more access to actually get limits. Most of the times we went up.
So let's back up a little bit, since we're talking about ding dong fishermen. It don't matter if you got a spear gun or boat or kayak or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like diver flags. Like I live literally right on Lake Erie, and we have a lot of people scuba dive here. I wouldn't say a lot, maybe that's not a good word, but it's not uncommon, right? And like, I know what a dive flag is. I travel around, I spend some time in the Keys. A lot of people, I think that they think that that's a buoy that they need to drive around, right? Whether
Absolutely.
It's brown bag or alcohol induced or just dipshits. So
jet skiers.
Oh,
they're the worst.
Producer dude is a jet skier. Take your licks right now. Producer dude, do you know what a dive flag looks like?
Nope.
See?
Never seen one.
Yeah.
He's like, that's a jet ski flag. You go at it and you ride around as fast as you can.
Yes. Run laps, right? So, again, with this thing, because, again, let's say there's 50 or 60 of you in the entire state of Michigan or whatever, right? Like, people, the general boater or producer dude, because he is really a jet skier, responsible one, I'll give him that. But these people that aren't familiar with this, right? Like, they don't know what a dive flag is. Like, we're not in the Florida Keys. Like, this is not an everyday thing. We're not in, in Key Largo here. So how much education goes into that, or how many issues have you had just from like, I mean, that's a serious safety concern.
Yes, 100%. I haven't had a ton. You just want to stay away from the areas where the boats are most common. If the more boats coming by, the higher likelihood of people not knowing what it is. So that's just, hey, my safety first. I'm not going to go in high traffic areas and yell at everybody else because they don't know what my diver down flag is. And for those people who don't know, it's very simple. It's just a 1x1 red flag with a diagonal white stripe in it. Divers have to stay within 100 feet of it, and boats aren't to operate a combustion engine within, I think it's 200 or 250 feet of that diver down flag. That's the law. Now, people who are being responsible and going
reality,
people who are going slowly and are actually able to make course corrections within 30, 40, 50 feet or whatever, I have no issue with them passing through an area that's maybe near to me, as long as they can see the area, see who's in the water, and make course corrections. I've never had any issues with people coming too close, as far as like when they see you, they know, oh, I need to stay a little bit further away. But as long as you're going slow, I've never had any issues with anybody or felt like in fear of my life or anything like that.
So, producer dude, I want you to visualize this, where I'm going with this next question. Like, let's pretend Country Steve wants to get into spearfishing.
Oh, yes. I love this.
Think about that. Like in a bikini, probably. Yeah, a bikini.
We're going to do diver down themed bikini too.
I think we got a whole video shoot planned from this already.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We are not. People are like, oh, take the high road. Like, do we even know where that is? We don't even, we couldn't find it if we tried. But so let's say Country Steve, because he's always fun to throw under the bus. He wants to get into this. Obviously, there's not really a lot of equipment. We mentioned you got to have the spear gun itself. You probably want a wetsuit for most of the season because of the water clarity. You got to have a dive flag, or you're going with someone that does.
Yep.
What else, I mean, do you really need to get in there if we wanted to tag along with you on this?
Just fins, a mask, and a snorkel. Those are like number 3. Those are the big 3. That gets you in the water and swimming. The fins just help you move faster, more efficiently through the water. Snorkel keeps your face in the water so you can actually look around while so you can breathe while you're looking around, so you don't have to keep taking your head in and out of the water. Just a well-fitted mask. After that, like you said, I mean, it's really just that'll get you snorkeling. I mean, that's what.
So are you using like a weight belt too?
If you need one, that's all depending on you, right? How thick is your wetsuit? What is your what's your body fat content or your buoyancy level or whatever, right? The more buoyant you are, the more weight you're going to need. Me, I don't need that much weight. I usually use 5-6 pounds, and I use about a 5 millimeter wetsuit for most of the season. So when I wear a 3 mil, I don't even really need weight. And that all depends also how deep you're going. If you're only diving, 12, 15, 20 feet, probably going to need a little bit more weight just because you're going to be fighting that buoyancy more. But once you get below like 20, 25 feet, you become more neutral or negative buoyant, and you'll stay on the bottom. So that weight becomes less necessary.
Do you ever do this with technically scuba diving?
No.
Is that legal to do?
No, it is not. That was part of the process. People were concerned about fair chase and scuba diving giving you an unfair advantage to be underwater for a significantly longer time and things of that nature. So and most people I know don't do it just because it's a ton of gear to haul around, and spearfishing is generally already pretty expensive as it is. Then add another $2,500, $3,000 worth of scuba diving gear. And it's like, you want to be light and easy in and easy out when you go spearfishing. So not a lot of people
Producer, dude,
with the scuba gear.
I think Country Steve might be out.
Yeah.
Because of
I think he might be out.
Yeah, I can't breathe in underneath the water.
Did you say no comment?
I said no comment. I had a comment, but I'm not going to say it.
Okay. Look at you taking the high road that you didn't know where it was at. Okay, so that's interesting. Again, legality wise, because I just start thinking again, I realize, I always think walleye, right? Mm-hmm. And that's just some of your stuff that I've seen. But because walleyes, again, you think about generally speaking, yes, in the spring and the fall, shallower maybe, but generally speaking, still like somebody's like, oh, they're shallow. Well, maybe 20 feet is shallow where they're at, like where I'm at now. But yet, if you got a snorkel and you got to dive down or get in range or visibility, like all of a sudden 20 feet might as well be 200.
Yeah, it can be a lot more. I mean, a lot of people just think that, 20 feet, I can walk 20 feet in 5 steps or whatever. And it's like you said, go to a recreational pool, and the deep end's, at the most, usually 13 feet. At the most, it's 10 or 13 feet. Swim down to the bottom, see how long you can stand on the bottom and swim around. And not only that, the
Not
more
long enough.
swim, the more aggressive you swim, the faster those fish swim away. The more you lay on the bottom and do nothing or just wiggle your finger and give them a reason to come around, that's where you're going to get most of your fish at. The more, like I said, the aggressive you swim, or more you swim at them with like intent, they instantly say, nope, I don't want anything to do with this, and they'll swim away. And you'll never be able to swim to catch them.
Yeah, I do a lot of work with Meat Eater, and they've got a few people that are contributors like myself that I think they're in Hawaii is where they're based out of. And there's some crazy stuff with that, because those people are going down they're athletes. I mean, they're they're almost they're down there like
Kimmy.
Yeah, Kimmy was one of them.
Yep. She's
crazy
athlete.
Yeah, just the holding the breath, and they're like basically stalking in there. It's just, that's a whole different ball of wax. I mean,
that's a lot of fun.
But anyway,
good at it. You're like, ooh.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by this whole thing. The non-scuba diving thing, that I guess that surprised me a little bit. But I mean, that would be, it would make it way easier to put a serious dent in things if someone could do that too.
Well, I mean, true, but I'd also say that DNR makes the regulations for a reason. And as long as you're following the regulations, I mean, how effective can you really be, right?
I think from my standpoint, I think it's better it isn't, as a guy that doesn't do it, right? Like right. There's just a lot less issues probably with shenanigans, and there's a lot less ability for somebody to maybe get into trouble with things, right? Like, because if you're limited with that stuff, it's like the difference between a bow and a rifle. Like,
right.
There's a difference. I mean,
for sure.
Right? Leave it at that. But so let's get into some of the stuff that I'm probably most intrigued with. And I think the people that are our followers, because I don't know how many guys are going to go buy a spear gun after talking this, maybe a few, who knows, right? Maybe they'll call you up. Are you doing any, do you like offer guided trips with this, or?
I do. Like I said, there's so few people who do this. I mean, we're a pretty tight knit community. Just hop on the Facebook group and just be like, hey, I want to go out. And, almost all the time you can find somebody who's like, hey, we're going out, this weekend, what kind of gear you got? This is what you'll need, and come on out. Find it, bring beer or buy gas, buy food, whatever.
So I'm sure, like, it's just like fishing. Like, I use G Loomis rods, and those are not cheap, but you could buy yourself an ugly stick, right? Like, so with the spear gun itself, like, what are the ranges of, like, this is just bare minimum to, like, this is the Cadillac?
So yeah, if you're doing freshwater, like, your max range, like 12, maybe 15 feet at the most. And that's pushing it. You probably shouldn't be taking that shot at 15 feet if that's the shot you're taking. But the range really doesn't change that much. Like, the water just kills that spear. So you got a really heavy spear, and basically all you can do is put bands on it, right? And more bands you put on it, not necessarily the further it'll go, but the more force it'll have when it gets there, because you're limited by a lanyard essentially on the spear itself, which I think according to the state of Michigan can't be more than 20 feet long. So by definition, you're already limited to 20 feet. But most of those guns, those spears, just don't have the accuracy or the punch to get out to 20 feet, especially what we're using, because a lot of these fish are using in cover, on rocks and things of that nature. So a more powerful gun is even worse in that situation, because if you hit a rock, you're going to basically destroy your shaft. And once you destroy your shaft, you're done. So you don't want to do that, right? So small, shorter guns with a couple bands are usually the go-to. You can get a decent gun for about $200, $250, or you can get a nice custom gun, a wood gun or something like that, and you can spend, really as much as you want. But a good custom gun is going to cost you $1,000, $1,200.
So on the actual, I guess it would be not an arrow, but a bolt, right? So on that, is that definition-wise the proper
term? You just call them spear shafts.
Okay, so on the spear shaft, like the point itself, is it just literally like looking like a bullet shape, or is there something else on there that like keeps the retention like you had when you're shooting a bow for like carp?
So yeah, there's these little things that call them shark fins that hide on the back of the fin, and we have these on the actual band itself. It's called a wishbone. You just load that right on there, and that holds that tension. You have a trigger mech on there, and then on the end of that spear, it looks almost like, it depends on, different manufacturers have different styles of points or whatever, but it's just hardened steel, and some of them have like almost like a trocar tip, like you'd find on a broadhead. And a flopper. Some of them have 2 floppers, some of them have single floppers, but once that goes through the fish, that flopper opens up, and just like a barb on a hook, it just kind of finds something on the fish and holds them on, and that's how you get them in.
Interesting. Producer dude, are you thoroughly at the edge of your seat right now?
I am intrigued. This sounds fun.
I can just see him on the back of a jet ski looking like a Rambo, one in each hand.
So I'm going to ask the question you probably get a lot is, how long do you stay underwater? Okay.
So most people I go with
longer than me,
30 to 45 seconds if they're comfortable in the water. I've trained, and I run, and I do breath work, and I've taken free diving classes, and I've kind of learned how to be more comfortable in the water, and I can hold my breath for about 2 minutes while I'm underwater actively searching.
Wow, that's huge. Like, that's the difference between, you're no Kimmy, don't get me wrong, but I mean, you're doing it.
Yeah. I've touched almost 93 feet on the line. So I've been able to dive down 93 feet and come back up on a single breath.
Now, when you go in, how far away from, like, you find fish, right? Do you have like a sonar and you look for fish with the sonar, or you just know the spots and you go in and hope they're there? I mean, how does that work?
I just get in. We tried the sonar thing back when we were in Linwood and Au Gray trying to find them. We were marking fish, and we jump in the water and look around, and we just never were able to locate fish like that. And that's when we started to learn that it's just a temperature and a time of year thing. And when it gets to a certain point, then you just start hitting structure near shore, and that's when we started finding fish. And so we just kind of stuck with that. That being said, we swim miles some days to get a limit of fish. I mean, one day it was like 6 hours, and I probably swam 2.5 miles to get 6 fish or 5 fish. It was like a significant amount of work to get the fish. It was 6 fish total. I think Riley got 1 and I got 5. And the more you swim, the more you're kicking, that's when your endurance kicks in. Because I can't hold my breath 2 minutes every dive. When I really push myself and I really relax and I get a good breath, I can get down there and stay down there for about 2 minutes. But on a normal, when I'm swimming around, especially at the end of the day, I'll be lucky to get over a minute on a dive.
So I think the thing that kind of comes up, and it's like a 3-prong kind of question, I guess, but it all comes down to location. So like restricted waters versus, like, from what I'm hearing from you right now, summertime's probably not the best time to do this, right?
No, sometimes it is the best time to do this.
Really? Yeah. I would think just a depth thing or something. But so give me like location stuff. We're not asking for exact spots, but more of like, are there places that you can't do this because of the regulations or restricted waters, or is there places just like Lake St. Clair has, generally speaking, clean water, Lake Huron, super clean water, where Erie can be greener, it's more fertile, right? Deal. So like maybe that's not as good. So give me a little bit on that location thing, or where you put in, or say we wouldn't even go to this lake, for example, or time wise.
Right. So I'll start with the waters that are available in Michigan currently for the new game fish. Tribal waters, part of that consent decree that just got renegotiated. We are not in any consent waters currently. So basically from Grand Haven north on Lake Michigan is out of the question. And everything from Alpena north on Lake Huron is out of the question. And Lake Superior got nixed altogether. So we are exclusive on Lake Michigan and Lake Huron for the walleye, northern pike, and lake trout. No Lake St. Clair, no St. Clair River, no Detroit River, no Lake Erie. And we will not be in any of those waters. That was part of what we talked about. And we talked with a lot of the walleye guys and a lot of everybody, they just, bass guys included, they were just like, hey, we don't have any problem with you doing this, everything kind of like north of Lake St. Clair and the St. Clair River, basically Huron and Lake Michigan up. We don't have any problem with that. But the big fishing, I think it's like 37% of all catch came out of Lake Erie. So a lot of people they want to really protect that spot. And they're like, hey, if you're happy with these lakes, well, you can have those lakes, and we won't, we'll be a party in favor of. So that's kind of how that works.
Do you think that was just because of number of anglers? Like, hey, let's not make this an issue because there's so many people at the party down here compared to
a lot of people at the table were like, hey, this is our spot. Essentially was what they were saying, and they were just like, hey, if you want us on your side, you got to make a deal with us. You stay out of here, and we'll let you go over here. And I was like, hey, it's you can't let perfection get in the way of progress. We're just trying to get in and get some fish for ourselves, and hopefully over time, doing podcasts like this, more people will kind of come to an understanding. And, and ultimately we're a community, and we're going to make decisions as a community. And, if that results, whatever the results are, what the results are. So that's kind of how that goes. As far as like going, I love Lake Huron, like you said. I mean, some of the water, you're going to see some of that footage. You're going to be like, wow, that water is just absolutely stunningly clear. And I love that kind of stuff too. But I mean, whether it's boats or shore diving or whatever, when the summer comes in, those fish start to come in and they love weeds. And I tell you what, I was shocked at how many fish congregate in areas that are like pier fishing areas. I couldn't believe it. Some of the highest density of fish I've ever seen are been within casting distance of the shore.
So have we learned, is there a certain type of weeds? Because this is where I think, obviously some people listen to this for however many minutes are like, this is kind of cool. But then, we want to learn some shit. So the type of weeds that you have, now I realize from Lake Huron to someplace else, this could change quite a bit. But have you noticed, especially if it's different bodies of water, how the type of weeds matter? Or is there anything from
They love cabbage. That's mostly what we got. You'll find some coontail, but mostly cabbage. They just love it. And they love it kind of sporadic, not too thick. When it gets too thick, they don't like it. It just seems like a little bit of crabgrass on the bottom's fine, but they just like tall, stringy stuff where they can just kind of chill in there. You'll see more footage of it. I'll have it in there, but they just kind of float right in the middle of them. And we would when we couldn't spear them, we'll take just a spool line and just jig head in a minnow, and we'll just swim over top of them and just jig them just like that. Well,
I think a lot of that's probably oxygen related if you're talking in the summertime. But so how deep of water are we talking with these?
You can see the bottom 12, 15 feet sometimes.
I think they're probably less spooky too.
That varied depending on the day too. They seem to be deeper when the sun was higher, and then as the sun set, they would move in closer to the rocks. I don't know if that's because crayfish come out or the minnows were, perch or whatever were hiding in there.
That's textbook, man. That's textbook.
Okay.
Well, I mean, that's what you always hear. Like, since, 30 years ago when we didn't have all the fancy stuff, people was always say high sky, go deep and low. Low.
Well, I mean, like it wasn't super deep, but I mean, where the weeds were, and then that was the deepest part of that area or that weed bed would, generally speaking, where you would find them at.
Have you even seen when you get in some of those weed, you said they're kind of in the sparse stuff, but like when it's higher skies, do they get buried into the bottom of these weeds for suspending, or
will sleep right on the bottom? I mean, they just lay right on the dirt and don't move a muscle, right in the bottom. Not particularly necessarily under anything, but they will lay flat on on the bottom on that sand, whatever it is, and they'll just lay there, not move a muscle.
Producer, we've seen that while filming a few shows together through the years.
Yeah,
not moving a muscle.
Yeah.
We've seen a few sleeping fish in our time. And interesting. I mean, I think this is the stuff that and keep hitting me with these things, because I think this is the stuff that, again, regardless if you're into spearfishing or not or whatever, like you can just benefit from this firsthand knowledge. Like I always tell people, like, I work with Aquaview and use Aquaviews, and it's like it's a game changer for me for learning stuff. But still, it's like a horse with blinders on compared to what you're seeing. You can only see so much with that camera, right? And you're attached to the cable, like. And I still think that the boat, Yeah, I mean it's amazing at what it does, but you're still, just to your point of, you got a boat driving across, that may spook them before you even get a chance to see where they truly are at in a weed bed.
They don't care one lick about boats.
Dude, you better stop that, because I'm going to tell you right now.
I've never seen them get spooked by a boat or anything. Never once.
Now I'm showing. I think you're a better spear fisherman than a boat fisherman. When I
tell you,
like that.
I couldn't. I was like, I know people say be quiet and don't make a lot, and I have not seen anything. I mean, I
can tell you that. I can tell you that is maybe not always the case, but definitely. I've watched when we've been ice fishing in 30-some feet of water where a guy drops a thermos on the ice with cameras and Mega Live and watch a whole school just gone. And then you're like, maybe that was just a coincidence. Yeah. And then the guy does it again and you're like, oh my God. Like and again, all the time? No. I mean, it's just when they're on and they don't care. But walleyes in particular are crazy spooky. That's like some of the stuff I was hoping to pick up from you is when you're watching these things. I mean, I've seen videos where guys scuba diving, go down and the bubbles cause them to, those fish to take off. And then other times guys literally go over and grab them. Like divers that are picking up lures and junk will go grab them.
I think a lot of that has to do with, I think that's kind of almost like a woman that's almost like a personality trait, right? Some people are just skittish and anxious, and other people are like, oh, what's up? It's just like deer hunting. Sometimes a deer will walk out into a field and just look at you, whether they smell you or whatever it is. And then other days they'll be right underneath your tree looking at you, and they're just like, what's up, dude? And I just have the same thing, because I'll do the same thing. Sometimes I'll see fish and I'll go to dive, and as soon as I start my descent, boom, they're gone. They just don't want anything to do with me. And other times I'll just dive right down to them and they'll just be like, what's up?
I don't think I've ever said this publicly, but there's a couple guys in our neck of the woods, I'll just say that are really good bass fishermen that people know, and they're certified scuba divers, and they do it quite a bit. And now, especially with GoPros and stuff, old Big Daddy over here has seen the videos, and those guys will sit down on the bottom scuba diving, and they will bang two rocks together, and they will literally hand feed crawfish or gobies or minnows or whatever to smallmouth bass, right? To smallmouth. And they're just like pets, like they're almost inquisitive, you know what I mean? And sometimes they literally will eat right out of their hands. Walleyes, I'm like, guys, they're like, dude, Ross, we have hundreds of hours under the water. They're like, walleyes, you could hand, $100 bills. And it's just like, no way. They're just
100% agree with that. I've never had smallmouth are a totally different animal, but yeah, walleye, they'll get close, but I've never had any time or even close to getting them to be like, I'm ready to eat from you. Especially smallmouth though. They just don't care. They'll swim right up to you, follow you around all day. They're like you said, they're like little pets. They're just like, what's up, dude? And then, like I said, you start moving rocks and things, they start hearing that. That's another way I try and get fish to come in, scratch on the ground, throw some soot or dirt in the air. Sometimes if a fish is hanging out, they might turn
their head.
Ears, come on in and say, that's worth a look.
Okay. So, it's just like, I don't care what forget spearfishing or walleyes or whatever, any type of fishing scenario, I could tell you, or anybody else could, if you do it long enough, basically in direct opposition of whatever that is. Like, hey, they like shallow. No, they like deep. Like, you can have a million stories like that. Right. So, but what are some things that you've learned over time with these fish that are like, I would call it a correlation, or something you could say, hey, maybe we're missing out as boat anglers that we don't realize that these fish are doing this, or like the weeds is an example of that, right? Like most guys don't fish weeds enough. They're a pain. You get your lures hung up or whatever. Right. What are some other things as far as maybe, like I think about contours, composition, bottom changes, stuff like that, or
love currents, anything where you get some of my best spots, current comes over, drops off, transition, rocks and sand or weeds or something like that. I mean, every fish in the freaking lake seems to be there. That could be sheephead, it can be suckers, it can be smallmouth, largemouth, pike, walleye, suckers, or carp or gar, whatever. I mean, when you get a good spot that has 2 or 3 habitat features or whatever, It just seems like everything will congregate there. There's like, oh yeah, current, perfect. Sand, perfect. Drop off, perfect. Thermoclines are another big one. I noticed that fish definitely will pick a warm or cold layer of that water to hide in, or whatever their preference is. So they always reference. They seem to stay around the thermocline, but whether it's a hot day and they want colder water, or if it's a cold day and they want the warmer water, they'll just kind of be. I think a lot of that has to do when people find suspended fish. I think what they're doing is relating to that thermocline, where the colder water is down low and that warmer water is just a little bit above it, and they'll just hang out in that warmer water just above that thermocline. That's probably something I've noticed.
Interesting.
And the sleeping thing too. The sleeping thing. I think that was just crazy to me. I was just like, I thought there was something wrong with them, because I was like seeing them and they're just laying on the bottom. They're usually tucked up next to a rock or something, or tucked in the rocks, and they'll just literally lay there and you'll literally see the sediment in the water that's on them because they've been laying there for so long. Just zonked.
Wow.
I was like,
yeah, producer dude, that's a question with all of our biology friends that we should ask. Like, do fish sleep, or are they like
sleep? I mean, you got to remember, these are, walleye, they call them walleye because of the reflective nature and the cloudiness of their eyes, which makes them a predominant night predator. And that is when they spend most of their time out foraging and getting a lot of their food. And that's why you'll see a lot of the action, we call it, right? That morning action and the evening action will pick up most. And then your midday will usually be the slowest. I almost guarantee it's because they sleep. I know it's because they sleep. They do sleep. But I mean, when they're out all night, they do have to eventually catch up. And it's not like a full sleep like we would, but they definitely, I've literally swam up and touched them, and they'll just swim off, and, like a rude awakening.
So we've learned that walleyes like to party.
Yeah.
And they will sleep it off.
Yep.
Okay. Interesting. So is there any type of structure, I've learned stuff. I'm not going to put words in your mouth. I'd like to see if it's a little different without baiting you too much here, but like size of rock, for example, because I've learned some stuff by both using cameras and just fishing and maybe getting in the water here and there. But anything that you've learned with that seems to be from maybe a species or preference?
So I've seen them. So in a lot of the spots where I'll dive, there'll be the big boulders, almost like car size rocks, where they'll, stack up for the break walls. I've seen them in there, just kind of chilling in those rocks. But mostly I see them, I'll say nothing crazy, just, a 2x2 rock.
Bowling ball.
Yeah. And just rock usually. And they're just usually tucked up right next to it. Nothing too crazy.
Get right up in those crevices.
Usually it's single rocks. I've seen them in big groups of rocks or whatever, where they'll kind of find a nook. But most of the ones when I see when they're on the bottom, like a place you could fish, for example, without, being right up in the, on top of these break walls. Most of them are, pretty wide open, spread out rocks, and they'll just kind of random. And I can't tell you how many I've swam past that I just didn't see because I was on the wrong side of the rock. Or, maybe they were just really well camouflaged that day. They tend to blend in really well. But they do. They'll just lay right on those rocks and just sit there.
So if you're like out, let's say at the Charity Islands, for example, like that water out there, as long as we don't have a giant storm, is like you could read a license plate on the bottom in 20 some feet, right? Oh. And maybe if we get more towards Linwood, because I'm pretty familiar, I spent a lot of time on Lake Huron. If we get more towards, Linwood, generally speaking, that water is going to be a little more off-colored, right?
Yeah.
So have you noticed where that helps you with not spooking these fish, or that you can get up closer to them, or that they're more active in the off-colored water versus the super clean stuff?
Yes. It's double-edged, right? The clean water, you can see a lot more, so you can identify areas that are higher density in fish, versus like when it's cloudier, you can get a lot closer to the fish. That's what I've noticed. Like when you got 12 foot of viz, be ready, because when you see that fish, usually they're like, how, what are you? And that's when you can get your shot versus like, if I can see 25 feet, I'm going to need to be on the bottom, laying and trying to attract them because most of the time they're going to swim away. So that being said, this past summer, I had a really cool experience where we had a stiff east wind coming across Lake Huron, and it blew a bunch of really cold, really clean water into this harbor. And when those two, one's probably 15 or 20 degrees warmer than the other water, but when those things met, they don't blend, right? They push against each other. And those walleye, were right on the edge of it. They were like, you could just kind of see their silhouettes hiding in there, and then they'd come out every once in a while, check you out, and then they'd go back in. But they definitely preferred. That was the first time I had a thermocline where it was like a vertical one instead of a horizontal one. Like it was a wall of water pushing against warm water, and they would stay in the warm water, but they would come into the clear cold water to check out the.
That's super common on Lake Michigan too, like Bay de Noc or Green Bay, like super.
Yeah,
Washington Island, all that stuff out there that where, like you said, it becomes a vertical wall. So how much have you ever measured the temperature to see? Because again, us fishing guys, when you talk to a biologist, like some of the guys we've had on the podcast before, like, we don't use the technical right terms, or maybe it's not even technically a thermocline, it's a temp break. Like I've been corrected by these guys all the time, even though we're generally speaking right. But how much temperature difference have you thought to measure it?
I tell you what, if you're not wearing gloves, it hurts your hands. So, to me, that's a good solid 15, 20 degrees. The only time I've measured it, I was with my buddy Shane and Aaron off. This is before it was legal for the walleye, but we were on Lake Michigan going on to Muskegon, and we had a west wind that turned that water, and we were 73 on the surface and 52 on the bottom and 30 feet of water. Like a significant water temp. And here's another weird little fact. Fish are cold-blooded, right? When you change that water too fast, you switch that water too fast, they'll go into shock and they'll just literally like freeze and lay on the bottom, almost in like a state of like vegetative state. And they won't even be able to move when it changes too fast on them.
I've seen that while fishing. They don't bite.
Yeah. Yep. When the water temperature changes too fast and they're not ready for it, or they've been, used to whatever degree of water, and they have a switch come in, they just straight up can't function, or just they're super, super slow.
So here's a question again, because I disagree with you on the boat spooking fish thing, but yeah, I don't know, a week or so ago, we looked over the side and we saw we were like in 40 feet of water, which is relatively deep for us. Yeah. And here I see this sheephead clear as day. That's like, when I say a foot below the surface right next to the boat, you definitely could have grabbed it type of thing, right? Yeah. Okay. And he's just kind of swimming along. And in the past, I've seen that with white bass. You actually see that quite a bit. I've seen it with walleyes a handful of times where there's almost like, hey, are they disoriented, or what the heck are you doing? And I know a lot of guys, too, again, not to sidetrack this too much, but they catch walleyes that are very high in the water column, maybe 6 feet down over 40, 50, 60 feet of water, something like that. Have you seen anything like that while you're scuba diving? Like, hey, oh my God, wait, there's some fish above me. Maybe you're going to resurface, or what's been the oddest thing, that you've come across that you're like, man, this is mind-numbing as far as I wouldn't have guessed that this could take place?
I've never seen nothing like that. Nothing in the water column that I'm aware of, that at least that I witnessed from in the water. Mind-numbing thing, man. Outside of like the sleeping, I can't really
zombie fish.
Yeah, the sleeping and like the cold, I can't really say anything outside of that that's been like, like all lightning or anything like that. Fish just hang out, man. They all like to, it's just, the nightclub of spots, that's what I would call it. It's just like when you find all the right features in a spot and all the fish are there. That's probably the coolest part I've said. It's like we come in there and, like I said, there's just fish everywhere, and you're just like, oh wow, this is incredible. That's probably the best part. But
One structure thing that you could obviously never really see with a camera or whatever, or at least not fully understand it, is a lot of bass guys, whether it's, thinking traditionally even shallower than what we're probably talking, but like guys will say, hey, on a dock or something, the fish are on the shadow side or something. Have you seen that with even like a rock, on the bottom?
Yes.
Or
That's really cool. Yeah. I was in Alabaster, actually, the old gypsum plant that kind of protrudes out there. It was like late June or something like that, mid-June. And those old, I don't know, whatever they are, the pylons that held up the trolleys or whatever they were, 2 walleye that I got out of there were, each of them, it was like, I think it was 2 pylons apart. Each one was hiding in the shadows of those pylons. So that's a very unique thing because you can't see them when they're in the shadows unless they're skylined against the light on the other side. Usually they're kind of low in there. You can't see them until you get into the shadow, because it's just like looking into a house from the dark. You can't see out of your house at night, but if you go standing in the street, you can see and see everything. So that was definitely something they are keen.
I wonder if that's a protective deal. Yeah,
I don't think it's protected. I think it's an opportunist thing. They kind of hide in there, and I think it's just like, oh, I bet I bet small fish probably do the same thing. Like, oh, I'll go hide in the shadows, and then, oh, look, Mr. Walleye is waiting for him there. Same thing with small. I don't think that's particular to any one fish, but I think predatory fish definitely will find the shadows to look
ambushing.
For. Yeah, exactly.
What about fish species together? It's like a good short story for you is back when I used to fish a lot of tournaments, we'd go through a spot and we'd pull like night crawler harnesses, whatever you want to call them, spinner rigs, and we just catch the tar out of walleyes. And we'd like, hey, let's go back through there. And me and producer dude have actually done this shooting videos too. And we'll go right back through that pass that we just murdered the walleyes on, and we'll run crankbaits, trying to see if we can catch bigger fish or whatever. And you go right back through that area and you catch some walleyes, but you catch a ton of giant smallmouths. Like smallmouths love crankbaits, like trolling walleye crankbaits. You catch them in certain areas. And you're like, man, I never touched a single fish, because smallmouth don't seem to like the night crawler harnesses, generally speaking. Mm-hmm. But how have you noticed anything with your own 2 eyes, with different species intermingling that you probably wouldn't think?
I've definitely noticed that smallmouth and walleye will absolutely hang out together. They have no issues with that. I definitely noticed that the big smallmouth, from what I've kind of said, like those 4, 5, 6 pounders,
or 10.15.
Yeah.
shameless plug, producer who put up there for our buddy Greg that caught the smallmouth.
But they'll the bigger smallmouth, I've noticed, hang out with the bigger schools of walleye, like so you'll see 2 or 3 smallmouth, big ones, they'll hang out with a walleye, and then when you get a big school of smallmouth, I've seen walleye hanging out with them. So I've noticed that sheephead don't have any issues hanging out with walleye. Those are probably the big ones. I think the smallmouth and the drum, they all hang out,
catfish,
smallmouth, walleye, and drum. Catfish are a damn mystery to me, man. I know they hide in the rocks and in the logs, and I just barely ever see them. They are just a mystery fish to me.
I can tell you that going way back, we're talking like 25 years ago when we used to fish a bunch of tournaments on Lake Huron, that we used to catch catfish out there in that gin clear water, even probably cleaner than it is now, generally speaking. Mm-hmm. And they'd be like 3-4 feet down, whether you are in the inner bay or the outer bay, or even towards the Charities, like crazy high in the water column. And they're like predators hitting crankbaits. Weird.
Yeah. I always thought they hide, like you go into Cabela's and where are they at? Almost always under a log or something like that. And I was, that's in my head, that's where they're at. But maybe that's just a flathead species. I've shot, like channel cats or whatever, but for the most part, man, they are.
Flatheads are a different deal.
They're a little bit different. I could see where you like a blue cat or a channel, you might be able to catch kind of doing their thing. I just do not see them near as much as anything else. I'm maybe I'm just not looking for them, or maybe if I did a little bit more research and, targeted their areas or whatever it is. But I think they're just more Maybe just river bound or something like that. I really don't know. I don't like I said, when it comes to those big bodies of water and long, big, wide areas,
Maybe they camouflage better too. I mean, it's just like a walleye. I mean, you're like, oh, I could see a walleye, right? And then you see them in the water and you're like, God, those things camouflage so good until you see their belly, man. Like you can't even tell they're there.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, when they get on the bottom too, and they start sleeping, their color pattern breaks up a ton. You'll see it in those videos I'm going to send you guys. I mean, super. I mean, that traditional, that gold and kind of yellow white breakup they have, that is nothing like that when they're laying on the bottom, man. They are all colored up. They are just all broken up. And you're like, wow, that is just a significantly different looking fish. And then when you get them off the bottom, they're like, oh, that's a walleye for sure.
That brings up a good point. When you catch walleyes, and people always say, and again, we don't really know, but when you catch walleyes that are really dark, people usually say that that's from like a rock. Those fish are hanging out in rocks.
Mm-hmm.
And you catch some walleyes that are they look like they're bleached out, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they are like white. Have you noticed anything with coloration based on where they are, whether it's in weeds or rocks?
If they're on sand, they're going to blend in as good as they can to that sand. So if that means lightening up their colors or doing whatever they got to do, absolutely. And then definitely being on those rocks, they definitely break up, and certain parts of them are dark, and then they'll have lighter colors. The shadow fish, like we were talking earlier, when they're in the shadows, they are significantly darker than their counterparts that run around in the sun.
Producer dude, I think we have a question for Travis now. Can these fish change their colors? Like
absolutely. I can, without a doubt, they can change it. Whether they're doing it like cognitively or not, I don't know. I don't think I wouldn't say they're like an octopus or something like that, but they absolutely can.
Smallmouth, I do know smallmouth can do that based on their stress levels. I've read about that with smallmouth, where you catch one just black. We've actually, me and producer did when we filmed the TV show, we'd have that. You'd get one and you'd see the thing pitch black. He'd jump out and he's like, get him in the boat. And he's like white.
Yeah.
Or it's crazy difference, but
yeah.
So what else could you tell me that would help me be a better fisherman that you've kind of observed here? I mean, the weed thing is, I think, I think, shallow weeds is 100% an overlooked thing for guys. They can just be difficult to fish, and maybe we're lazy or a lot of places people don't know to look there.
A bobber probably would do the trick. Or a minnow or something like that would probably be a killer in those weeds. I'd throw $1 at that.
Have you ever seen a walleye actually like strike? Have you ever seen a walleye feed while you're underwater?
Oh yeah. I had a school of them in Tawas Bay. They were feeding on the perch, and there was a big wall of weeds, and the perch were trying to hide in this wall of weeds. I don't know if they herded. I'm pretty sure they herded them in there or something, but they pushed them in there, and they were just whacking at them left and right. And so I dove down to get in the picture and try and get I got some video of that. And
we 100% want to see that.
Okay. I dove down there and I pull up, and they're all like trying to get behind me because they were like, you're blocking our target here. And they were going right after them. Now I've tried throwing, like you said, throw gobies at them and stuff. They just swim away or whatever. But that was probably the best feeding frenzy I'd ever seen in the actual water, was them going after them.
Were they pinning them suspended, or they pin them to the bottom, or
it was like a wall of weeds, and they were probably about, I don't know, 8 feet down. I mean, the weeds probably came up to about 5 or 6 feet, somewhere like that from the surface. And that's when I could see them. So that's when I dove down. And when I pulled up, they were all like, what are you doing? Blocking us out. But they had them, like in the middle of the water column in the weeds.
What about picking stuff? Because I've seen a little bit of videos from the lenders about picking stuff off the bottom, where they go in there, and they literally like nose down in. Like some of those fish even got all chewed up noses because they're beating crawfish up down in the bottom.
Okay.
Have you seen like feeding off the bottom at all?
I haven't seen that. This I have seen. When I'm out there swimming around and I find lures, I'll take a lure and I'll throw it, right? Just to see if I have, especially smallmouth are big for this. I'll take it and I'll throw it. I'll tell you this, the faster it goes to the bottom, the better the reaction is. If I throw something that starts doing this, they'll kind of look at it. But as soon as they see, if it has like a 3/4 or 1 ounce jig head on there, and you throw that thing, and as soon as it starts running towards, they go on that thing like madness. They love it, man. Something about something that's sinking and, you know, going towards that bottom fast is like an instinct for them to just attack it and go right after it.
So here's my closing question for you.
Yeah.
So the guy that kind of taught me the game, he always said, I hope I live long enough for you to see you enjoy a day in the lake. That was his thing to me.
Okay.
And at the time, too young, too dumb, don't get it, right? But like, I get it now. Like, you can't explain that to anybody. If you have to explain it, it's too late. Like, do you, along those same lines, like when you go out, you're a young guy, you're competitive, right? Like, do you have to shoot fish? Is it a bad day when you don't, or just seeing all that stuff and being down there, how cool it is? It's like taking a nature's hike, really.
Yeah, no, that's exactly why I started to do it more. It's just because it's not about it. Yeah, the more you do it, it's less about shooting fish. It's more about finding the fish and having those encounters with those fish. And then, just getting to observe them. And, you know, like I said, you come back, it's not like, hey, look, I shot this walleye. It's like, dude, let me tell you this story or show you the video of these walleye, and then always throwing them. Yeah, like you said, feeding the smallmouth or whatever it is. It's like every time you do it, new things happen, right? It's never like it's the same school of fish or this or that. You know, I haven't swam with a sturgeon yet. Really want to do that. It's just like those kind of things. You know, you just every time you hope to find some kind of new adventure, new experience, or have a lake trout or a salmon swim up to you, or like who knows? Like it's so many different opportunities that you just have to be out there in order to have that experience and have that encounter with that, you know, that fish you haven't done it with yet, you know, or whatever. So
I'm going to do something that's going to make producer dude cringe. I always close this out by asking somebody a question that I did not allow them to prepare for. Nothing crazy, but he always cringes because everybody chokes. So John, here's the deal. Are you going to choke? Well, producer dude, what 50-50? I mean, I don't know, but I in all seriousness, like, what is the one thing you want to put out there, or what is the one thing along those lines, whether you're defending yourself as a spear fisherman? Because again, you look at the comments on there, people that just like to run their mouth or whatever. What is the one thing you want to get out there that we need to know about spearfishing to kind of plead your case that would, you know, quiet the people that are making stupid comments online, or that somebody trying to get into this should know? It's
not as easy as shooting fish in a barrel. If anybody says that, it's not. Like, everybody thinks, oh, look, he shot a spear or a walleye in the face. It was so hard. And it's like, you didn't see anything up to that point. And that's probably partially my fault, right? Because I take videos, and in order to get a lot of views, you usually got to cut it to the most interesting thing as fast as possible. If I posted every video that I dove down, swam around for a minute and a half, nobody would watch it. So I cut it. But just because you see me shooting a walleye does not mean it's super easy. Like I said, you have to swim, dive, equalize, and then be able to find and get that fish close enough to take that shot. So please don't think that, you know, there's a lot of people doing this and it's just absolutely destroying the fish populations. It's very few people doing this. It's a very short window. We're very selective. We're not, you know, littering, you know, with lure packages or bait containers or anything like that. We take in what we take in, we take out what we take out, and, you know, we just want some fish to eat and have some good stories to tell when we get done with it.
Well, we appreciate you giving us your time. Why don't you let us know where we can find your organization or any of your stuff there if people want to watch some of this video stuff that we put up?
Yeah, Purely Michigan Spearfishing on YouTube and Instagram, or you can come and join the group on Facebook, Michigan Spearfishing Association or Michigan Free Divers and Spearos. Those are like the big ones. And Instagram probably is the best for the videos. I'm going to start getting some more full length videos on YouTube here soon, but those are the main ones: Instagram, YouTube. Oh, TikTok, Purely Michigan Spearfishing. That's more like the funny side of things. I didn't make it serious when I started it, but then it started blowing up a little bit. And I was like, look at that.
Nice. Well, thanks again for giving us your time, and keep us posted on what you're learning with those. I can't even say walleyes, just fish in general, because I think that's kind of the coolest part to a guy like me that's honestly probably not going to get into that, but yet I can appreciate what you're doing, and I like the education out of it.
Hey, man, thanks for having me on and let me talk to people and hopefully bridge that gap between the angling, the fishing, the hook and line, and the spearfishing community. Hopefully get a better understanding of what we do.
I think you did them well tonight. So appreciate your time.
Thank you, brother.